Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining the Conversations with Kim talk show. I am your host, and welcome to the village. Today, we were supposed to have a talk on uh, assessing your financial future. I do want to just go ahead and get this out the way. Frances Smith Dean had an emergency. Life happens, everyone, and she is unable to be with us today. However, I do have a very special guest, which I'll get to in just one moment. I'm asking that you would please like and share. Please feel free to comment, interact. You know, this is the village, and we want to see this be a positive experience every time. Um, I was reminded today that there are many, many people being affected by this COVID, that we've had over 100,000 people that have that have passed away as a result of this virus. And so I just want to really acknowledge the fact that there are people out there hurting, and I want to welcome them to the village. This is a place where we want to encourage you, we want to love on you, and we want you to feel welcome. This is a place where you can just come and experience a company of people, a village of people that will embrace you and understand what you're going through. And you don't have to be any certain way but who you are and be yourself. So I definitely wanted to be able to get that out. Sometimes we don't really acknowledge the people that are suffering because it hasn't hit our home. But that is definitely something that people are dealing with, and I wanted to be very sensitive to that. So again, without any further ado, I do want to introduce our guest for tonight. As I stated, Frances is unable to be with us today because she had a personal emergency. But I do have my best friend and short-term notice guest that I am forever in his debt and will continue to, say thank you for this time that he's come on. But please, Village, help me welcome my dear friend, Ezra James.
Good evening, everybody. How are you doing?
Hi, Ezra. Welcome to Conversations with Kim.
Hi, Kim. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Glad you can be here. I am excited. We are going to be talking about family dynamics. This is something that Ezra and I have discussed in times past. We both have different backgrounds. We grew up differently. And I don't know about you, but in your friendships, do you get a chance to kind of just deep dive and discuss personal issues, discuss everything across the board as it pertains to how you grew up, what you were exposed to, and the different things that makes you you. And so, Ezra and I get an opportunity to do that on a regular basis. So, I'm going to go ahead and set the stage, Ezra, as you know, and so let everyone know. I was raised in a single family household. My mother raised me, and so she did the best she could. I don't have any regrets regarding how of my upbringing, but I do know that there is a vast difference between what my mother offered versus what a two family household could have brought to my environment. And Ezra has that experience. He was brought up in a two family household with two parents that were very successful. So Ezra, give me some background on your experience growing up.
Background in what way? What do you want to know?
Really? So
Yeah,
again, this is my friend. So this is y'all
I'm
y'all
gonna.
can
You
be
know, I'm gonna give you.
personal.
You know, I'm gonna give you a hard time throughout the
Yes.
evening, but I'm gonna try to make sure I deliver what you need in order to make the show great. So, just so you know, I was born in Louisiana, so is my family. I'm a gentleman from the great state of Louisiana. I have to let people know that I currently live in Texas, which is also a great state. So I'm giving you a shout out to everybody across the country and the world from Texas. Yeah, Louisiana, Central Louisiana, Southeast Central Louisiana, Southeast Louisiana is a different group of individuals. So both of my parents are from that area. Um, they grew up in very different circumstances themselves. They, if you ask them, they'll both tell you that they grew up relatively, poor and without means for the most part. But in terms of how they grew up, was a little bit different. My dad was a product of a single parent household because my granddad passed away when he was relatively young. Of course, my mom had both of her parents, but she lost both of her parents at a young age. Her dad died when she was 10, and then her mom died. Well, no, her dad died when she was 18, and then her mom died about 10 years after that. So, actually, about 2 weeks after I was born. So, she lost her parents very young. So that laid the foundation for a lot of the way that we were raised in that overall household. Both of my parents worked extremely hard growing up. They both graduated from Southern University in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. Go Jaguars. I was a Jaguar baby. So I was born at Southern in Scotlandville at the charity hospital that no longer exists. Um, once they graduated, well, my dad graduated first, and then my mom graduated the following semester. And the only thing she asked of him for graduation, after he asked what she wanted, she asked to move to Texas because the job market was a little bit better. So, of course, my dad reluctantly gave her what she asked for, with the one caveat that they could maintain a household in Louisiana because that's where the family was from. And so we were back and forwards between Texas education, schooling, and then being in Louisiana for family functions, periodic trips, et cetera, so forth and so on. My dad is a pragmatic individual, very straightforward. I get that from him. My mom is more of a soft-spoken, direct, extremely devout in her religious beliefs type of person. So I refer to them as Penny and Charles a lot of times, or when I'm talking to people who know who Penny and Charles are, I'll often refer to them as the Lion and the Lamb. Not without saying the lamb is probably a little bit more powerful than the lion, but that's just the dynamic those two have. So I came out of that product. I was a only middle child, if that makes any sense. My older sister and older brother were both children prior to my parents getting together. And so they both lived with other individuals when I was born and when we first moved to Texas. My brother was born maybe 5 years after me, not maybe, but actually 5 years after me. And once he was born, my sister came to stay with us. So overnight, I got essentially two siblings. And so I went from that only child to a middle only child. So keep that in mind when I'm talking about these family dynamics, that I'm a natural middle child, and I'm the one that gets away with the most because I am the one that will push the envelope, whereas my older sibling and younger siblings do not. So that's a little bit of foundational information about where we come from.
Okay, and so that's your foundation. So, as we move forward through this conversation, my foundation is the fact that, again, I was raised up from, with my mom, and my dad was in and out of the picture. And when I was with him, he gave me I would say, the street education. And then my mom, she gave me what I would call the church education. So I had a good balance of the two, coming up. So I was kind of like that well-rounded child. I kind of got the best of both worlds without having the benefit of them being in the same home. So I think that a lot of how we were brought up has a lot to do with how we turned out as individuals.
I agree.
Yeah. And I see oftentimes now, just kind of a sidestep here, where children are addressed in a way that is, I guess I could say condescending. I don't know what word I'm looking at, but the parents seem to be always irritated with the child.
Yeah, annoyed.
And I see the difference in that child and the child that was brought up differently versus, so tell me, where were you in that dynamic? Were you disciplined a lot as a child, or were you that one that was able to have a conversation with your parent?
So yes, I got a lot of discipline because I was that child that was going to push the envelope. I was going to ask why a million times because I really wanted to understand why. So sometimes I knew that it would annoy them for me to ask why, so I asked why. But at the same time, I was able to explain myself if I was able to be articulate it. And based on what that conversation looked like, it may have gotten me out of some trouble. I remember one time I was in church. My mom was in church. My dad really didn't go to church until I was about 16, 17, about to graduate high school. And that's when he started to go to church because I guess he had just got tired of my mom complaining about the fact that he didn't go to church. And he knew that as we started to leave the nest, it would be him and her. So he figured out a way to go to church without going to church. So he became a member or a part of the parking lot ministry. So now he's in church, but he don't really have to go in church. So one Sunday I was about 10 or 11 and they were giving out awards for something at church. And I'm in the audience and my mom is in the choir stand and I can't really see her because she's behind the pulpit. And the minister who's handing out the awards calls my name. Of course, my name is Ezra, that's biblical. And he says it wrong. And so my entire life, people have not said my name right? So in school, it was always the beginning of the school, changing schools. First couple of days in school, you're always having to be the person to raise a hand and correct individuals. I got to a point by the time I was 10, 11 that I just wasn't going to correct people. I was just going to say here, present, whatever the case may be and move on, right? But in my mind as a 10, 11-year-old, I thought to myself, if anyone knows how to say this name right, it has to be a man of the cloth, right? So he calls my name out and says it wrong. And so in my mind, I made a decision that I was not going to answer because to me, I just thought that was crazy. I was going to give him the option to correct himself on the next go around, but it didn't correct. It stayed the same. So I just sat there because in my mind, it wasn't my name. So he wasn't calling me specifically. So after about the 7th time, I could see my mom kind of leaning out from behind the pulpit and like looking at me like, don't you hear him calling your name? And I'm like, mm-hmm. And I lower my head and like I'm flipping through the Bible because I'm not going to get up. The church is turning around. People are looking at me. They know who the individual is. And eventually I went up there and got it after the fact. But got home that afternoon, long story short, and my mom was livid at me. Of course, she tells my dad, you really need to discipline your kid. Basically, it was like beat your kid because he didn't follow directions, acting up in church. So my dad was like, nah, I told you, when you go to church, you ain't supposed to act up. That's a bad reflection on us, this, that, and the third. So he takes me in the room and I'm just sitting on the bed. I'm visibly upset by the whole situation, but I'm angered by the fact that you would make me go and pick up something from somebody who was supposed to know how to pronounce my first name. Right? So my dad sits down and he says, all right, now you finna get it, but I really need to understand the logic behind this. And my dad talked to us like Donahue, because that's what we watched as kids. Even with my dad, he would sit us down after watching Mr. Rogers. He'd be like, let's sit down and watch some Donahue at 10 o'clock, right? So think about that in terms of having conversations with an individual and being a kid. And so I told him, I was like, he didn't say my name right. So he was like, what are you talking about? I was like, so I showed him the award and I said, yeah, he didn't say my name right. And so my dad looks at me, he was like, what do you mean he didn't say the name right? So I told him how he said the name. And so my dad just looks there and I said, Dad, he didn't say your name right either. So because I'm a junior and my dad is a senior, immediately he goes, I probably wouldn't have got up either. So he's like, you stay right here. He gets up, walks out the room, shuts his door, calls my mom and says, hey, I need to talk to you in the bedroom. They go in the bedroom, shut the door. And I can hear them whispering to each other about what's going on. And then my dad was like, no, that should have known how to say his name if he called himself being a minister. So that got me out of being able to have a conversation. Sometimes got me out of trouble. So that's just one instance, where
Right.
I could have probably got killed just off of waivers based on my mom's perception of the situation versus how my
Right.
dad viewed the overall situation. And just to let you know, that is kind of the basis of the topics that you wanted to get at today when we were talking earlier about the ability to let children be children and let them explain to you in a certain way why they do what they do. They don't have the logic of adults. And I think in our community, a lot of times we expect kids to understand at an adult level. My parents would always say, listen, we want you to go to school every day. But if there's a day that you don't feel like going to school, I'd much rather you tell me that you want to stay at home than for me to get a phone call from the school saying, hey, you acted up because you wasn't feeling it. Because I'm an adult. My dad was like, I'm an adult now. I want to go to work every day. So I know you being a kid, even though that's your only job, still let us know if you want to stay at home. Now, I never really took them up on that because I thought that was a trap. But that's the kind of environment that I kind of grew up in.
Yeah, I use the analogy all the time, and you've heard me say it, that there's a difference in going to McDonald's. I've seen it a million times. You get to McDonald's, and there's the one parent that says, go ahead, Michelle, order what you want. And she's like, and she's taking forever, like people behind her. And then, he's like, go ahead, go ahead and order, place your order. And she's like, and so she's taking her time trying to reason in her mind what she
Correct.
wants. And he's given her the freedom and the liberty to say, this is how you do it. This is how you make a decision. Take your time. Don't let people rush you, and figure out what you want and communicate that to the person that can help you.
That's true. It
Whereas
means a lot.
it does mean a lot, and
Mm-hmm.
it forms the character of that child versus the child that their parent comes in and says, go over there and sit your behind down. I'm gonna bring back 3 hamburgers and some french fries, and then y'all gonna get whatever I give you. You know what I mean? They don't
Yeah, no,
allow
yeah.
that child. Go ahead.
And I think that people say, one thing or another. So for instance, the person who's ordering for the kids, they got a budget they're on, and that's what they're thinking about. And so they're hyper fixated about making sure that everybody gets to eat with the $10 that they have, right? So we're gonna order off the dollar menu. If I send Billy up there to order and he gets something that's $10, then everybody else loses out. So I get the dynamic, but what is missed out on socially is the ability for a child at a young age to tell someone what they want in the beginning and learn how to do that. I think as you move through life, if you don't learn how to ask for what you want, it does have a cascading effect when it comes to like where you're going to go to school or where you're going to get education. When you get ready to, go for job interviews, what do those job interviews look like? Are you able to negotiate your salaries? Are you able to have, adult conversations when it comes to trying to check, pick a spouse or a significant other? I mean, having conversations and allowing people to work through at a young age all the difficulties of trying to figure out what they want, there is definitely something to be said about that. And it's a difference between this is what you're going to get, I'm going to give you, versus you need to ask for what you want. That whole thought process from a child perspective, and then again, as you grow up and become an adult, is very, very representative of who that individual will be. And I was that kid where my dad was like, now, before we go in here, you got $5. You know what $5 is, you know what $5 can get you. Now you're going to go in there, you're going to order your food, and whatever you get, that's what you're going to eat. And so I had to go up there and look and say, hey, okay, I want that filet o fish and that small fry and the small Sprite. I was that kid. So it does give you the ability at a young age to know what it is that you want and how you want it.
Right. And it helps you to form those reasoning skills early. I can tell people the school doesn't equip you with everything. And sometimes in your home, you don't get that. So here I am in the military. overseas bouncing checks because I didn't understand how to balance a checkbook, right?
Right.
And I was in there every week paying late fees. And the lady one of these days, the lady came in. She said, "Come here," and she and she sat me down and gave me a little class on how to make sure I knew
Those
how to
things are
balance
important.
my checkbook. And so again, it takes a village, to
Right.
raise a child,
Right.
and you don't always get everything you need at home. Um, so we've talked about our backgrounds. We got about 5 minutes left of the show.
Yeah.
Um, so you're today,
Okay.
right? You are a very, I guess I don't want to say matter of fact. Would that be a good example?
Yeah, I would often refer to myself as a likable asshole, for lack of better terms. So you'll like me, you'll think that I'm extremely direct in like a lot of ways, but then once you get to know me, you'll realize that it is very, as a matter of factly, and there's no malicious intent embedded in it. So you'll get what you get, but I'm gonna be like, oh yeah, that was kind of stupid, right? Like but it's as a matter of factly. But now that you know that it's kind of stupid, let's move on and figure out how we can fix the problem. I'm that type of individual. So yes.
Yeah, and it's not offensive,
No,
so even
no,
though you
no.
said that, it's not offensive because that's just not your demeanor. But I think it stems from the fact that you had an opportunity to express yourself as a child. Whereas
Yes.
for me, I didn't necessarily, I don't want to say I didn't have it, but I didn't have the liberty to say, what I wanted to say because I understood there was some consequences for me, voicing what I
Right.
had to say. And I needed to go ahead and keep that to myself or tell one of my cousins, what that was, but definitely wasn't going to voice that to my mom.
Right. Right.
Right.
Right.
So, I think this has been a very, productive conversation. I think that people, especially amongst friends, do not
Right.
have the opportunity to have these conversations and deep dive into different backgrounds and just talk.
And I would encourage people to have those conversations. If you're really friends, ask what was the first 0 to 5 of your life actually like, and really don't take a surface answer to it. Actually, ask them what it is, because a lot of times people will give you a PR statement or a release for how their life was because they don't want to have the conversation. But if you're really good friends and you're a part of a deep inner circle, that is when that is the one of the best times to have one of those, hey, very transparent, I didn't really have a great background, or I had a wonderful background, at least I thought it was wonderful. I will say that, you were leading to a question about what does that look like for me now being an adult. I think the difference between me and a lot of individuals who may have grown up in environments where they were not able to vocalize to the individuals in the household what was going on with them, they were a little bit emotionally stunted. And I'm not a professional in any shape, form, or fashion, but I find that a lot of the healing therapy that people have to go through takes them back to their childhood. And it goes back to exactly what you spoke to about not being able to express themselves in a comfortable way without there being some level of repercussions. There's something, you're from the Army, so you get shell shocked, right? So as a little kid,
Mhm.
if you're honest about something that you do, if someone perceives it as something wrong or you shouldn't have done it, then if you get reprimanded, or if there's some type of corporal punishment associated with it, after a while, you don't necessarily stop doing those things, but you learn to keep them to yourself, or you find a better way to conceal what you're doing. So as as you age, being able to be transparent actually helps in a lot of ways for you to be able to speak to the individuals who now turn into your new family, whoever you're going to end up marrying, significant other, children. I mean, we talk about generational, blessings and cursings. I think one of the biggest generational curses that we have in the village is not allowing for people to grow that inner child up in a healthy way, whether that's from the beginning till now, or at some point where they have to say, okay, I have to go back and now, go back and pick that child up and then kind of walk them through how to maneuver and move forward so that I can be a healthy individual. That's the difference between me. I speak to my friends and we're always hashing and breaking apart and getting down to the granular specifics of how that from zero to whatever, how that impacted where they are today. And so
Right,
that's what I'll
right,
leave people with, breaking those things apart and kind of digging into them and figuring out why it is that you're still trying to defend your inner child when somebody says something to you. Why are you lashing out angrily? Why are you easily triggered by things? It usually goes back to you not being in a comfortable environment as a child.
right. Well, listen, we're going to have to go ahead and stick a pin in it right there. That's all we have time for today. Ezra, thank you so much for
Anytime.
being my guest today. I
You owe
totally
me
appreciate
big. No, anytime. You'll probably see me later on for your viewing audience talking on some topics because me and Kim always have conversations. So we'll definitely bring some more conversations to you guys out there.
Okay, thank you so much.
All right, you take care.
Listen, everyone. Again, we're going to bring back Frances Smith Dean for the financial segment because she definitely is someone that we all want to hear from. Please like and share this. It's all about having conversations with Kim. We've gone a little bit over our time, but I just want to say, remember, silence creates distance, but conversations with Kim builds the village.